Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and today we are going to be talking about The Gift by Danielle Steel. This was actually the book I pulled for day 17 of my 24 Days of Bookmas. Didn't get it read on that day, ended up reading it yesterday, and it hooked me right away, and I ended up falling in love. So we're going to be talking about this today. I did want to do a video specific to this book. And so yeah, well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. I will say there's going to be spoilers, but I will warn you, I'm going to kind of just talk about it in general, and then I will warn you before I get into the spoilers. But I can't fully talk about this book and what I enjoyed without getting into spoilers. But like I said, I'll warn you before then, so stick around until that point. Um, and then if you don't mind spoilers, I say stick around after I get to that point because there's a lot to unpack here. But yeah, this is the second Danielle Steel novel I read. I read two of her nonfictions, which were all right. But the first book I read by her was The Ring, because that my grandma recommended that one. Even though she got a little confused, she meant another one, but she thought that was the title. And just absolutely loved that one. I did also start Winners by Danielle Steel. It was another one of my 24 Days of Bookmas books, and I read about 70 pages. That one's a little bit more contemporary, and while I'm not like disliking it, I'm not loving it either. Like, it hasn't hooked me yet. I'm definitely going to continue that one, but I will say, like, out of the books I read by her, two have been more like historical fiction, and that one's contemporary. And I'm enjoying the historical fiction a lot more. The Ring is World War II. This one is 1950s. So yeah, I'm sensing a theme. There's a lot of books I have by her. My grandma gave me her entire Danielle Steel collection, so I'm definitely gonna be reading more, and it'll be interesting to see like if I do end up liking any of the more contemporary works, or if I'm gonna just enjoy like her historical fiction. So that's gonna be interesting. But let's go ahead and talk about The Gift. So this is perfect for Christmas season because it starts off at Christmas of one year and follows along that entire year to Christmas of the next year. And it starts off with a family. I will say there are trigger warnings. There is um, death of a child in this book, and then there's also kind of drinking, and there's an unwanted pregnancy. So there talks a little bit about infertility as well. So there's just kind of a lot, but it really deals with like pregnancy and child loss. So just keep that in mind if you are going to be reading this, because that might be triggering for you. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, so it starts off with this family and they're celebrating Christmas, and then their little girl ends up getting really, really sick and passes on. So after that, of course, they just kind of self destruct. Like, the family just completely falls apart. They're not spending any time with each other. When they do, the parents are like sniping at each other and such. And so they have Tommy, who's 16, and he just tries to stay away from them as much as he can. Like, he stays out of the house. The dad's staying out of the house, working really late. And the mom just doesn't want to cook anymore. And she quit her job. She's a teacher, and she went to subbing when Annie was born. And now she doesn't have that, and so she's just kind of drifting. And so they just fall apart. Enter Mary Beth, who is Tommy's age. She's 16 as well, and she's headed through to Chicago from Iowa, and she ends up stopping at this little restaurant, and she just likes the vibe of the place, and so she ends up there looking for waitresses, and so she decides to stay in the little town, and she meets Tommy. And then through events, he ends up bringing her home to meet his parents, and through her they start to come together, and when they start to come together, they start to heal a little bit. And so that's kind of the premise of the book, is kind of their loss and their grief and how Mary Beth comes in and helps them heal, and they help her out as well. And so that's what I can give you without spoiling anything. But it is a emotionally heavy read, but it's also very beautiful, and there's that silver lining, um, which it was just I really connected with the book, and I just really, really enjoyed it, even though it was so heavy. So if those things won't be too triggering for you and you like kind of emotional reads, this is definitely one to pick up. And like I said, it's good for this time of year around Christmas time because it spans that time frame, but just really, really beautiful. So I am gonna get into spoiler territory. I'm gonna try not to spoil too much. Um, but there's one main plot point that I'm gonna have to spoil in order to fully talk about this book. So if you don't want spoilers, jump off now. But basically, with Mary Beth, her story is she's 16 and her first time ever having intercourse, she ends up pregnant. And the guy is kind of a senior. She's a sophomore, he's a senior. She went to prom and her date ends up getting drunk, and she's kind of a straight and narrow kind of character. And so she decides she's just gonna go home, like she doesn't want to deal with him. And the senior boy is like, "Well, I'll give you a ride." And so they end up hanging out because she has, she's well before her curfew, and so they end up hanging out a little bit. And on the way home, he ends up going to this park, and encourages her to take a little sip of gin, and she's very naive. He didn't like force her or anything, but she's very naive, and she doesn't have any clue about like sexual interactions or anything like that. So he definitely took advantage of her, and at the time he's broken up with his girlfriend and whatnot. And so they end up sleeping together, and he doesn't protect her or anything like that, and she has no clue. And so she ends up getting pregnant. And by Monday, he's back with his girlfriend and he's going to marry his girlfriend. She does tell him she's pregnant, and he's like, "Well, I'm marrying my girlfriend. Like, I'll help you get rid of it if you want to." Well, it's illegal at this time. And so, and she doesn't want to do that anyway. So she ends up going and just like, whatever, like, "You're out of the picture. I just thought you should know." And she's worrying about how to tell her parents and whatnot. Well, she's got morning sickness and such, so her brother learns that she's pregnant and tells her parents. Like, she doesn't even have a chance to tell them herself because her brother tells them. Her dad's very, very old fashioned, like kind of mean, a bit verbally abusive and such. And so he's like, "You're going to the convent, and I don't want to see you until it's done and you don't have a baby anymore. Like, get rid of it, and then you can come home again." And just very verbally abusive and whatnot. And so she ends up going to this convent, and she's just not happy there. So that's why she decides to go to Chicago. I think she wants to end up going to college there. Like, she has big dreams. She wants to go to college and get an education and have a career and such, which her dad thinks, no, women, you get married and you have babies and you take care of your family. He has that mindset. It is set in the 1950s. And so she ends up planning on going to Chicago. They stop in this little town along the way to get food, and she sees that the restaurant's hiring. She likes the vibe of the town, so she ends up just staying in this town. And that's where she meets Tommy, who is part of the family that lost a child. Um, and so he comes in for dinner because his mom doesn't cook anymore. He doesn't like going home, because it's just very depressing and very toxic now without Annie there. And so they meet and they start talking, and really hit it off. Well, he starts talking about Annie with Mary Beth, which he hasn't been able to talk about her with anybody. So that kind of starts the healing process for him. And he doesn't know she's pregnant. They end up kind of falling in love, and she's scared to tell him. And the way he found out she was pregnant was really, really cute. I really enjoyed like that whole scene. And he loves her, so he's like, I want to marry you, like, let's keep the baby. And she's like, no, it's not, I can't care for a baby, and we're both only 16 years old, like, no, and I'm not gonna saddle you with this responsibility, and potentially ruin your future. And so she's just, even though she is naive in some ways, like, she does have a good head on her shoulders, and she realizes she can't take care of this baby. And so she's planning on having the baby and put it up for adoption. And he just really, really wants to marry her, and he wants to keep the baby and start a family with her. And she's like, we're not keeping the baby and we're not getting married at this point. Like, if we're still together in the future when we're older, like, yes, I would love to marry you, but we're too young right now. Like, she's kind of solid head and he's just more the romantic, like, let's get married. Well, somebody sees him with this very pregnant girl and tells his mom. And so she confronts him, and he has to explain, it's not my baby. Like, I did not get a girl knocked up. Like, it's not my baby, but I'm in love with her and I'm helping her. And he's also helping her continue her education. So any schooling he's doing, she's doing it as well. So that way she can keep up. And his mom's a teacher. So she ends up helping her and giving her more advanced projects because she is a little bit more advanced than Tommy is. So once he brings her to meet his parents, like, they end up falling in love, and so they start spending more time together as well. And she's coming over for dinners and whatnot, and so she's bringing them back together, and they start the healing process. Um, because like they said, they completely just went away and isolated themselves from each other. And when they were together, they were sniping and angry and such, which the parents had a lot of guilt because they thought it was just like a cold. The mom even called the doctor and he was like, I'll come the next day, but I'm seeing a lot of colds right now. And they didn't realize how seriously sick Annie was. And so they have a lot of guilt. They felt like they let Annie down. So they kind of blame themselves and each other a little bit. And so that's part of it. And so Mary Breath brings them together. Um, and in the end, they end up helping her, and she helps them, of course, as well. And so not only is called the gift, not only was Annie a gift, but this new baby is a gift as well. And so yeah, it's just really, really beautiful. I'm not gonna spoil what ends up happening, but it's just really, really beautiful, and how they stepped up when her own parents couldn't help her, and then in turn she helps them come back together and work through their grief a little bit. Um, just I just really love this book, and Liz, who is Tommy's mom and Annie's mom, she did struggle with fertility. Like, it took her 7 years to have Tommy, and then they thought they couldn't have any more kids, and Annie was kind of the surprise baby. Um, when Liz was already, into her 40s, she was a surprise baby. And so, she did struggle with that as well, to get pregnant with these babies, and then to lose Annie so young. But this new baby is definitely a gift to their family along with Mary Beth. So, just really, really beautiful, even though it is emotionally heavy. And so if you like kind of those emotional, like, very sweet, heartfelt books, this is definitely one to read for sure. And yeah, I really connected with it and really enjoyed it. So that is a gift. Let me know down below if you have read it, um, and what your thoughts were on it. But I thought it was beautifully written and just really heartfelt. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.